Hello, it is I, RP, your supercharged host for this very beautiful Sunday afternoon, and I have here with me below the Voge. I think that's how the brand is supposed to be called because some people call it Vogue, but the staff call it Voge. The Voge Bicose or Bicose Real 5T. I'm not going to bother using the whole name of the bike's model. From now on, I'm going to just call it the Real 5T or the R5T because that is so much more useful. Below, I have with me a Class 2B electric scooter from Voge. This is going to peak at 13 kilowatts on paper. That classifies it as being part of the 2B license for all of you Singaporean riders out there. For the rest of you out in other parts of the world, that doesn't matter because you can buy anything you want. I guess, particularly in the US or I guess Australia, Canada. But I have with me this electric scooter for the whole weekend, and I've managed to actually test it out quite comprehensively, played with a lot of settings, open up a lot of the panels and see what ticks, and I will share with you my thoughts on this. Let's go. So let's start by discussing how the R5T electric scooter performs with some basic numbers. The R5T comes with a 13.5 kilowatt PMSM motor with a max torque value of 50 Newton meters. Off the line, at the most basic normal power setting, the acceleration rockets you forward with the same feeling you would probably be getting from much larger scooters, despite technically being licensed in the same class of 2B scooters like the Aerox. Think bikes like the Yamaha T-Max 560 that sit squarely in the class 2 bracket in Singapore. You go from 0 to 80 kilometers per hour so fast and so silently you almost feel like a ninja. That said, despite Voge claiming this thing has a top speed of 115 km per hour, I have never been able to go more than 100 km per hour on a flat open road in relatively windless Singapore, and that's the reading on the dash. The handling of the R5T is quite in line with most 2B scooters in the market. It's got just as much of a compact wheelbase along with 14-inch rims that aid in swiftly changing directions and staying leaned over to maintain a turn. I was able to effortlessly make U-turns using only a single side-by-side lane, and it's very easy to make low-speed maneuvers on it. That said, it's not a selling point because every 2B scooter can do this. But what helps in the maneuvers is simply the fact that it is an EV. Just like I mentioned in my Gogoro review, the instant feedback from your throttle makes bikes more responsive and easier to control when going slow. The caveat here is that the R5T, during my 4 days of test riding it, had a noticeable jump in power at the exact same spot when opening the throttle, no matter the ride mode selected. At 0 to hard throttle, the power ramps up very gradually, but the instant your throttle hand goes past the half throttle mark, there is a surge in power before the motor controller reels it back in and starts giving linear power delivery again. It is a very noticeable on-off feeling when hovering the throttle around the 50% mark. However, I have a strong feeling it is a software issue, and I do not know how widespread it is among the fleet being sold, as the Voge marketing team had not received any feedback from owners about this being a problem. The stock CST tires are surprisingly not terrible in the rain. It's well-rounded and provides good feedback and can even tolerate some sand and gravel without slipping too much. The brakes are not amazing, but decent enough. I did manage to trigger ABS in the rear when I was doing an emergency brake test, which usually doesn't happen when I test bikes heavier and with longer wheelbases than the R5T. I recommend leaving the TCS and ABS on for newer riders at the start, trust me. Now onto range, which is probably the looming question over everybody's heads. The R5T has two main batteries with 27 amp-hours of capacity each. On economy mode with the lowest brake regen setting, I ran for 69 kilometers and was left with 24% charge from full for an estimated 90 kilometers of range before your bike shuts off. On sport mode with the highest brake regen setting, I did 84 kilometers and was left with 6% charge from full, estimating at a range of about 89 kilometers. Most of my riding is typical of riding collector roads and expressways in Singapore. I'd give the range an average of 90 kilometers, but depending on your use case, it would vary as little as 80 kilometers with balls to the wall riding and no regen features on, to 100 kilometers if you ride like a neutered bull. So moving on to the notable features of the R5T, let's start with the most obvious thing you will see on the bike. An 8-inch horizontal TFT display that is operated via touch. Yes, it is a touchscreen system. And no, almost none of the buttons on your handlebars operate anything on the dash itself. The touch sensitivity on the display is pretty good and the menus cycle through with pretty high responsiveness. It's also pretty easy to read under bright sunlight and angled for easy reference of your speed and power output. On top of that, the default dash layout shows everything in big honking numbers that are easy to read, even if you have what Singaporean Chinese call 老花眼, basically eyesight loss in elderly.
I see nothing.
That said, the rest of the menus are pretty convoluted, as is the setting up of the onboard navigation system, since it not only requires connection to your phone and app, but a map box token as well. The rest of the call and music features are pretty self-explanatory at this point with most Chinese-made motorcycles. The bike is keyless, using an NFC card as the default option with the ability to pair it to your phone and app via Bluetooth. To be honest, the Bluetooth option is popular among Chinese manufacturers these days instead of RFID key fobs that the Japanese use. I can understand it being a lot more secure, but it's really finicky and its usefulness really heavily depends on the specs of your phone. The bike also comes with a single front-facing dash cam that records speed, throttle position, and which brake levers are depressed. The video output only goes up to 1080p. It's not particularly on the level of quality for content creation, but it is clear enough to get a wide field of view and capture number plates in the case of accidents. I think for most riders, a rear-facing camera is far more important, but at least this means you can buy a single camera setup and aim it rearward instead of a more expensive dual camera setup. Once you get into it, the bike has 3 ride modes, being economy that caps power output to 5 kilowatts, normal that caps it at 10 kilowatts, and sport that goes up to the motor's stated 13.5 kilowatt rating. The kicker here is that each mode actually at the moment had either an unintended feature or a bug that allows the motor to put out an additional 2 kilowatts on top of the maximum when you hold the throttle wide open all the way. I don't think economy mode is worth using for the most part, as if you are riding typical speeds in Singapore, it doesn't really actually extend the range much. But it neuters the acceleration to the point of feeling like a 125cc scooter and caps the speed to about 75 km per hour. There is also a reverse gear. It's not as convenient as simply backpedaling on this already incredibly light scooter, but if you have terminally short legs or have to reverse up a slope, particularly when stuck at all those pesky basement parking gantries. You also get a convenient cruise control button, and I found myself to be using it a lot to reduce the strain on my throttle hand. You also get a single USB socket just under the handlebars, right beside the NFC card reader to unlock your bike. My only issue here is there isn't a substantial hook or a carby compartment to put something you would actually be charging with it. The 33-liter underseat storage is also pretty substantial. I could put quite a lot of things inside, including all my camera gear and backpack. It could fit a full face helmet, but it would depend on the design. Something compact like the RX-7 in smaller sizes would fit, but my largest head and Icon Airform couldn't get the seat to lock. Standing at 1.77 meters tall with an 85 centimeter inseam, the R5T fits me well enough if on the slightly smaller side of things. My arms hang loose and relaxed when upright, or I can lean back a bit with my arm outstretched. There is plenty of leg room in the standard position, and they also designed the scooter with platforms for stretching your legs out up front. It's good enough and my feet weren't slipping off or anything, but it would have been nice if those platforms up front were slightly larger. The pillion footrests are also incredibly large, to be honest, and should be comfortable for most pillions, as comfortable as being a pillion rider can get on a small scooter, to be honest. The seat, while it is wide and spacious for both the rider and a modestly sized pillion, honestly doesn't have exactly what I'd call plush upholstery. It serves its purpose fine, but if you use it daily, you'd like to have something better. The suspension in the scheme of sub 200cc scooters, I'd say they aren't out of place. The bike doesn't rumble much, if at all, from slightly uneven road surfaces, but it definitely won't take speed bumps at speed very well. The mirrors are honestly great for a stock piece of equipment. It allows a very wide field of view on top of being pretty large to compensate for the usual scooter problems of the handlebars and stalks being too short. Like I said before, I found myself using the cruise control a lot, and that kind of boils down to both the throttle springs being relatively heavy as well as the absolute need to ride it with the throttle open to the maximum, in my own personal case on the expressway.
My hand hurts, but it was worth it.
With a net weight of 150 kilograms inclusive of the batteries, it's not terribly heavy. Almost anyone can easily push it around and manhandle it, but it is definitely way heavier than similarly sized scooters like the NMAX. The question then depends on whether weight matters to you, especially if you have some sort of disability. Otherwise, the 15 kilogram difference will be absolutely unnoticeable by most typical riders. The R5T is pretty good looking in my personal opinion. It leans a lot more to the modern sleek side of things. It does seem to have taken a tiny bit of inspiration from the Aprilia SR GT in my opinion. The only difference here is that the front end is a lot sharper with steeper angles. It looks sporty, it looks aerodynamic. The headlight assembly has a cat-like appearance to it, and the lines of the entire scooter zigzags like a lightning bolt towards the rear end when viewed from the side. The mirrors are absolutely gorgeous in my opinion, having a sharp leaf shape to it, and they almost didn't look like something you'd find on a stock machine. The hand controls are also nicely laid under a rubber covered surface that gives it a flat and car-like feel to it as well. It also doubly serves to make the switches underneath less prone to corrosion from rain seeping into it. Though as well, with all rubber surfaces, you may have to expect that eventually it will degrade after years of use. The rear wheel hugging plate carrier is, in my opinion, one of the better looking ones out there. It's not overly big and doesn't overstay its welcome when looking at it, compared to many designs out there, particularly the awfully hideous ones on bikes from brands like Bajaj. They even put some honestly interesting little playful touches on the aesthetics department by incorporating a tiny little spinner on the rear wheel with the Voge logo on it. Look, I'm a grown-ass man and I couldn't really give two wazoos about it, but I'm pretty sure someone out there will find it interesting. The horizontally mounted rear suspension does make the R5T stand out a fair bit when looking at it from the left side as well. Having said all that, while I think it is pleasing to the eyes if you're looking for something aggressive and modern, the build quality isn't exactly the best. A lot of the panels creak and rattle throughout. Go over speed bump, creak. Make a turn, creak. Turning your handlebars, the buttons on the hand controls themselves also aren't particularly responsive to light presses, especially the turn signals. A lot of people have ridden up beside me during my rides asking me how much it costs and mentioning they were keen on getting one to do food deliveries. I can get the appeal if you're using it for work. Charging this thing is dirt cheap. It cost me roughly 4 Singaporean cents per kilometer traveled compared to petrol that usually costs people around 6.7 cents per kilometer if we use an NMAX as reference, or Gogoro's swappable batteries that cost around 6 cents flat per kilometer. There's also a point to be made that while yes, at 14,800 Singaporean dollars for the machine price, it is more than double the cost of a similar 2B ICE scooter, but you are essentially getting something that runs like a 2A machine and you cut out on many essential ICE maintenance costs like oil and filters. That said, delivery riders are probably one of the few demographics I discourage from buying one as their primary tool for work, unless they do it part-time. The range is pretty insufficient for a full day's work, and it requires a typical charging time of about 5 to 6 hours before you are ready again, unless one is willing to settle for charging more frequently in between to stagger working and charging hours. I think the Voge R5T is probably best suited for people with predictable routines and would probably like something that performs better than a typical 2B scooter without actually having to work for a higher motorcycle license class in Singapore. Otherwise, it is also a good option for those who want to get their feet wet on EVs but cannot afford to take the dive on an actual electric car or much more premium electric motorcycles, but want at least a somewhat respectable level of performance and looks as their first example of what an electric motorcycle should be like. My personal opinion is that the R5T provides relatively good hardware for what it costs, but it falls short on the software side of things. If you are patient and willing to wait for updates or are willing to get an OBD for 2 or 3 grand to tinker with it, by all means go for it. I still think there is a diamond in the rough in there. Now, what do you think of the Real 5T or R5T from Voge? I think as a scooter it has a lot of promise. There are quite a lot of things Voge will need to do to actually make it a better package or more polished package, but thankfully most of it is I think software based that could easily be fixed if you are an early adopter of one of these machines. So unlike a lot of bikes I've reviewed in the past where a lot of its shortcomings are hardware based and you can't really do much about it after you buy it, thankfully the issues I have with the Voge is primarily software based and they can be updated as time goes by in the next year or so. Anyway, for those of you who were at the launch event and were one of the lucky, I think 3 or 4 dudes and dudettes that actually bought one of these, do let me know down in the comments what you thought of your own Voge R5T after what 1 month of riding and owning this thing. Let me know down in the comments so you can share with the community as to what a real long-time owner feels about this particular model. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, do support me by giving me a like, subscribe, click the notification bell icon, all that YouTube jazz. I have a web store that sells merch, t-shirts, bucket caps,
all that stuff. It helps this channel go further by subsidizing a lot of the costs that go into making a lot of these videos. So if you enjoyed this video, please support. Thank you. See you on the road. Peace out and bye-bye.